federal campaign, you can designate a deduction each month to the organization of your choice, and AFA number 12037 is one of the few on the list fighting for your family. Help us continue to do so by designating your CFC contribution to 12037 when completing the CFC form in your payroll department.
There are people on that list whom I could not vote for.
Roe v. Wade is doomed. It is gone because Donald Trump won the election.
It is settled law, and it is a precedent, whether you like it or not.
Roe v. Wade, in many different ways, has been affirmed over the years.
God help these old men if they tick off these suburban women and who've never really thought that their reproductive rights were at risk.
Roe v. Wade is going to disappear.
Jeff, I heard you say earlier that within 18 months, abortion could be illegal in as many as 20 states.
No, I said abortion will be illegal in as many as 20 states because Roe v. Wade is dead.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio, the day before the 4th of July edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Great to have you in the conversation with us today. A lot we are going to talk about today. We're stacked and packed and locked and loaded. A lot of attention is going to be today on Amy Barrett and the open seat on the Supreme Court that Donald Trump is going to nominate somebody for. That's going to be kind of the focus, at least, of our first hour. But before we jump into all of that, we want to turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in Isaiah's chapters 24 and 25 today. I encourage you to go there and read them for yourself. In fact, go to pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net, bookmark that page, open it up every morning, read the passage in your own copy of the Bible, pray the prayer back to God, read the Word, pray the Word, and we can all do that together. Now, as we begin our conversation today, I want to talk for a minute to those in this listening audience who are in a situation where life seems to be crumbling around you. You look around and you see obstacles that you cannot seem to overcome. They seem to be too big for you, no matter how hard, no matter how long you try. And I want these words today to settle in your heart and be a source of comfort to you. Here's what verse 1 in Isaiah 25 says, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things, plans formed of old, faithful and sure. Now, one implication of this is that God has plans for your life. He has a plan to redeem your life. He has a plan to restore your life. And Isaiah tells us these plans are formed of old. He saw this day that you're in right now. He saw this day coming a long ways off, and he formulated a plan just for you in your time of need and distress. Now, Isaiah says these plans that God has made for you are faithful. Now, the word faithful means trustworthy or dependable. It's something that you can count on. So these plans that God has for you are plans that you can count on. You can place your full trust in the plans that God has for your life, for the path that lies in front of you. And Isaiah says they are sure. God is going to realize his plans for your life. There is nothing on earth that can stop him from doing that, because his plans for your life are sure. A sure thing, a sure bet. God is going to fulfill his plans for your life. He says this about the Lord in verse 4, you have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm, and a shade from the heat. So if you're stretched financially and you're not sure you're going to make it or how you're going to make it, if you're in distress and have needs that are not being met, center yourself in God, and He will be your stronghold. He will be your protector. He will protect you and defend you and provide for you. He will be a shelter from the storm and a shade from the heat. So never forget that God is bigger than anyone or anything that has come against you. This is what Isaiah says to God in verse 5. You subdue the noise of the foreigners, the racket of everything that's around us, as heat by the shade of a cloud. As heat is subdued by the shade of a cloud, so the song of the ruthless is put down. You know, when I mow my lawn, my legs are still pretty weak, recovering from the radiation therapy, nerves regenerating, but it's coming along slowly. You know, and pretty much my entire lawn is exposed to the direct heat of the sun. So I get to the place where I need some relief from that glaring sun. So what do? I take a break and I sit in the shade on my deck and I drink something cold. I get refreshed and get ready to tackle the rest of the job. So God, Isaiah is saying, is like that shady place on my deck. His Spirit is like that refreshing drink of ice-cold iced tea. And so we have something then to look forward to. He says in verse 8 that God will swallow up death forever. The Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces, and the reproach of His people He will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. You know, today we have terrible things said about us as believers. We have vile, untrue, vulgar, slanderous, completely false things that are said about us. And God is going to bring that to an end someday. Not in this age, He's going to do it in the next, which is going to be like this age, only a lot better, because we're not going to have the complications, the distress, the evil to battle in that age as we do in this one. Verse 9, Isaiah says, it will be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for Him that He might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for Him. Let us be glad and rejoice in His salvation. So what's the key for us to get God's salvation? It is patience. It is to wait. We have waited for Him that He might save us. We have waited for Him. Let us be glad. There was a famous preacher of the 19th century named Philip Brooks, and he was pacing around one day, and a friend asked him, what's the trouble, Reverend Brooks? And he says, the trouble is that I am in a hurry and God is not. Remember another story about a boy at the bottom of an escalator in a department store, and the saleswoman says to him, son, are you lost? And he says, no, I'm just waiting for my gum to come back. and it, you know what? It did. His patience was rewarded. Well, let us take a moment and go to prayer and pray some of these concepts back to God that we find in these two chapters. Lord God, You are our God, and we exalt You, and we praise Your name, for in perfect faithfulness You have done marvelous things, things planned long ago. We bow before You this day as the sovereign ruler of the earth. You can open the floodgates of heaven and shake the foundations of the earth. You have power and authority to punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. We confess that we as a people have defiled our land by disobeying Your laws, violating Your statutes, and breaking Your everlasting covenant. We pray together that You will forgive us, purify us, and break the power of the consuming curse that we have brought on ourselves. We pray that You will renew a right spirit within this land. We ask You to destroy the shroud of deception that enfolds our people, the sheet that covers their minds and hearts. We pray that You will make Your light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of Your glory in the face of Christ. May we honor You and revere You as a people once again. I pray today for myself, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point, that we all will acclaim your majesty and give glory to you. I pray that we will wait for you and for your salvation. Please be a refuge for us in distress, a shelter from the storm, and a shade from the heat. Wipe away the tears from our faces and remove our disgrace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Lynn Ingram of Redeem Clean felt God call him to support the American Family Association.
I'm a laundryman. I'm the son of a laundryman too. I love clean clothes. I love the business. I love everything about it. This project was built exclusively to support AFA and AFR. There's no strings attached. Another thing that I would like to see come out of this is that I would like to see other business people feel a calling to support ministries wherever and whatever they do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean Laundry Detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and get Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. In an epic rant, Maxine Waters encouraged those who disagree with the Trump administration to follow, heckle, and harass them when they're seen in public. Waters said, "Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to. Show up, and if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere." This type of rhetoric foments violence. Folks, the left is completely unhinged.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Talking today about this vacancy on the United States Supreme Court. Donald Trump is going to release the name of his nominee next Tuesday, July the 9th. And the leading candidate, the one that the American Family Association is urging, is Amy Coney Barrett. Now, it's interesting. I got a piece I'm looking at in The Hill, which is one of the leading political publications on Capitol Hill. Here's an excerpt. 3 conservative groups, the American Family Association, that's us, that's your American Family Association, the American Principles Project, and the Judicial Action Group, this morning will urge the president to nominate Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And that has launched the next paragraph. The momentum building for Barrett's nomination has triggered Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He's issued an entire thread on Amy Barrett and just attacking her. That's how you know you're close to the target. When everybody on the left starts firing salvos at you and the hysteria begins to ramp up, you know you're pretty close to the target. So Senator Chuck Schumer sent out a whole blast of threads attacking Amy Barrett, accusing her of attacking the Supreme Court's decision upholding the Affordable Care Act. That is true. She criticized it as something that's absolutely unconstitutional. She fought efforts to ensure that all women have access to contraceptives. That's a twist. What she fought was the government compelling companies or organizations of Christian faith to be required to pay for abortions for their employees when it was contrary to their deeply held religious convictions. And Chuck Schumer says she also disagrees with stare decisis, the idea that cases like Roe v. Wade are settled law, and instead said she wants space for re-argument. And she's right about this. We're going to talk about stare decisis here as this hour proceeds. But she does not have the same reverence for stare decisis that people on the left have. Now, what stare decisis is it's the doctrine that if the Supreme Court has decided something, then that precedent is sacred. That precedent is inviolable. You can't touch it. You can't change it. And it controls everything after that opinion was issued. Everything that comes after it is controlled by that precedent. That's the doctrine of stare decisis. And that's where you get this idea that Roe v. Wade is, quote, the law of the land. What are they talking about? It's Supreme Court precedent. The Supreme Court has settled this case in 1973, and the doctrine of stare decisis says, well, if the Supreme Court has settled it in 1973, then it is settled. Nobody can challenge it. Nobody can argue against it. It is a done deal. And Amy Barrett says, no, I don't agree with the doctrine of stare decisis. You know, for the simple reason, here's why we do not like the doctrine of stare decisis. If the Supreme Court precedent was right, then yeah, we will defend the Supreme Court precedent. And we will say, yeah, that's a useful guide to courts everywhere about how to decide cases in front of them. We got no problem doing that. If they're right, we'll back them, we'll support them. But if the ruling is wrong, then all stare decisis does is cement a horrible ruling into permanent law. And we're not about that. We're going to criticize that. That's not the way we are to be governed, because the ruling factor here is not the prior Supreme Court ruling. It is the Constitution. What rules here is the Constitution. So if a precedent is consistent with the Constitution, we'll support it. We'll defend it. If, on the other hand, a precedent is contrary to the Constitution, if it violates the clear principles of the Constitution, then we will oppose it. And Amy Barrett will do the same thing. That's one of the reasons why we here at the AFA just love her as a possible nominee. Now, here's what Schumer said about her. The bottom line is that Judge Barrett has given every indication that she will be an activist judge on the court. You know what she would be activist about? She would be activist about returning the Supreme Court to the authority of the Constitution. Yeah, she's going to be an activist doing that, an activist to turn the court away from activism, away from judicial innovation, and back to being grounded and founded in the Constitution. So in that sense, yep, she'd be an activist, the kind of activist that I like. What Schumer says, if chosen as the nominee, she will be the deciding vote to overturn Roe v. Wade and to strike down pre-existing conditions and Obamacare. And he's probably right about both. Now, the Judicial Action Group compared the two leading candidates, Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh. You're going to hear a lot about Brett Kavanaugh, fine judge. He's on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, one step below the Supreme Court. You'll hear a lot of people talking about him. And I think the more that people on the left find out about Amy Coney Barrett, the more you're going to hear this clamor for Brett Kavanaugh. They're going to want Brett Kavanaugh just because he's not Amy Coney Barrett. Now, here's what the Judicial Action Group, Philip Jareggi heads this up, and we work with them on a lot of issues. Here's what they said. The Obama administration's briefs to the Supreme Court defending Obamacare relied heavily on an opinion of Kavanaugh, who had previously claimed that Obamacare was a tax. So Roberts' ruling, arguing or deciding that Obamacare was constitutional, was based on an opinion that was written and delivered by Brett Kavanaugh. Barrett disagreed with Chief Justice Roberts' opinion, and implicitly the opinion of Kavanaugh, which claimed that the Obamacare penalty was a tax. Here's what Barrett said. She said Roberts pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute. He construed the penalty imposed on those without health insurance as a tax, which permitted him to sustain the statute as a valid exercise of the taxing power. Had he treated the payment as the statute did, as a penalty, it's right there in the law, it's a penalty, not a tax, he would have had to invalidate the statute as lying beyond Congress's commerce power. A judge who adopts an interpretation inconsistent with the text fails to enforce the statute that commanded majority support. If the majority did not enact a tax, interpreting the statute to impose a tax lacks democratic legitimacy. It is illegitimate for the court to distort either the Constitution or a statute to achieve what it deems a preferable result. So those are the reasons why we have some trouble with Brett Kavanaugh. He's mixed up to his elbows in the Obamacare ruling. And he's also issued some kind of squirrely opinions regarding religious freedom. He noted in a case in which a faith-based nonprofit and other religious ministries were forced by Obamacare to facilitate access to contraception, Kavanaugh ruled for the nonprofit, but he wrote this: "It is not difficult to comprehend why a majority of the justices in Hobby Lobby would suggest that the government has a compelling interest in facilitating women's access to contraception." Boy, that is skating right on the edge of total disaster. That it's not difficult to see why they would believe that the government had a compelling interest in ordering people to violate their conscience in order to provide abortion-causing pills to their opponents. So if he does make it to the Supreme Court to be screened, he's going to have to be grilled very heavily and closely on that alone. So we continue to believe Amy Coney Barrett is a good choice. Now let's pick up some sound bites here on the whole subject of the next nominee to the Supreme Court. Now here is Lindsey Graham, and he sends a kind of an alarming sound in my ears to the whole concept of overturning bad Supreme Court precedents. Let's listen.
Well, I'm pro-life, and the job of a judge is to decide cases before the court. But one of the concepts that really means a lot in America is stare decisis. That means you don't overturn precedent unless there's a good reason. And I would tell my pro-life friends, you can be pro-life and conservative, but you can also believe in stare decisis. Roe v. Wade in many different ways has been affirmed over the years, but I would hope the justice that sits on the court, all of them, would listen to the arguments on both sides before they decided. But stare decisis is a well-known concept in our law.
So Lindsey Graham, who's going to be one of the people voting on her, and he voted to confirm her when she was interviewed or grilled by the Judiciary Committee a year ago, back in October. She was approved. Her nomination was approved. She got 55 votes, including 3 Democrats, to put her on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, and Lindsey Graham voted for her. So apparently didn't have any problem with her judicial views at that time. You know, and Lindsey Graham concerns me because he keeps coming back to stare decisis. I mean, he says, yeah, you got to think with your mind and all that kind of stuff, but he keeps coming back to stare decisis. Like that's got to be the ruling dynamic in this case. And again, we do not believe that stare decisis ought to be upheld regardless of what the Constitution says. And I've got a column that's up on this topic today. Jeff, would you check and see if that is up? I don't want to bust Jeff down, but he's sneaking a peek at the World Cup every once in a while.
Just once in a while, yeah.
Yeah, he just, that shows Jeff's commitment to journalism because he wants us to have the latest breaking news from every dimension of our culture.
That's
including the world of sport.
Yeah. So if you hear any inappropriate yelling or noises at the wrong time,
who are we checking in on? What's the game?
England and Colombia.
England and Colombia. England is my team in the World Cup. Not that I care about the World Cup, but if I did, I would be rooting for England.
It's 0-0. So you haven't missed
0-0. So I haven't missed a thing.
And your column is up.
Okay, column is up. So we'll have Jeff, when they get to halftime of the game, Jeff will tweet that out and pin it to the Facebook page. But it's on this topic of just generally. What's the title of that? What title did I give it to it?
Roe,
yeah.
Roe is the issue. There is no other issue.
Yeah, there was a line in a Paul Newman movie, The Verdict, where he said, "This is the case. There is no other case. This is the case. There is no other case." He just constantly, this is the case. There is no other case. So that was the inspiration for the title. Roe is the issue. There is no other issue when it comes to nomination to the Supreme Court, and I will explain why when we get to that. So anyway, Lindsey Graham says you don't overturn precedent unless you have a good reason. Well, Lindsey, let me give you a good reason to overturn the precedent of Roe v. Wade. The right to abortion, as Antonin Scalia said, is not in the Constitution. There is no right to abortion in the Constitution. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Several years ago, I was involved in a very interesting endeavor with the American Assembly, an organization started by President Eisenhower. The Assembly brings together people from radically different viewpoints for a very intensive weekend of discussion, debate, and dialogue for the purpose of hammering out a consensus statement of commonly agreed upon principles on a particular topic. This particular year, it was the influence of religion on America. On Sunday, you assembled together to decide on a line-by-line document prepared from the weekend discussions. This particular Sunday, we spent at least 15 minutes debating the first line, which said, quote, "ever since our founding documents," end quote. The liberals strenuously objected to the plural documents because they wanted only the Constitution, not the Declaration. Why? Because the Declaration mentions God and appeals to the supreme judge of the world and on a firm reliance in the protection of divine providence. In other words, when our forefathers declared their independence from Great Britain, they never intended to declare their independence from God. I won the argument with arithmetic. I said President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address in 1863, and he said 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. If you subtract 77 from 1863, you get 1776. I say we agree with Lincoln that America was born in 1776, and the Declaration is our first and foremost founding document. Almost everyone agreed, and we moved on with the founding documents in the statement, which included the Declaration of Independence. Have a great 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. For more information about Southern Evangelical Seminary, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Quick note on the Battle of Gettysburg, which was fought at this time of year in 1863, July 1, 2, and 3. And of course, that was a decisive battle in the Civil War. That was the apex of the Confederate Army. They briefly broke through the Union lines on the top of Seminary Ridge, but they were repulsed. The pickets charged across that open field. They were just riddled with grape shot. They had spent all of their artillery. They had no way to set down covering fire for these troops as they advanced across the open field, got cut down, and the Confederates had to retreat. That was the end of the Confederate advance in Washington, D.C. Took another year before the results were finally determined, 2 years, but that was pretty much the beginning of the end. So there was a lot writing on the Battle of Gettysburg, and after the war was over, when the Union won, President Lincoln, the day after the war, as a matter of fact, went and visited General Daniel E. Sickles. General Sickles had his leg blown off at Gettysburg, and by the way, he kept it in a jar on the mantle. You can believe that. That's kind of ghoulish.
Yeah.
So, but General Sickles asked Lincoln if he was anxious before the battle, and Lincoln said, "No, I was not. Some of my cabinet and many others in Washington were, but I had no fears." He said, "In the pinch of your campaign up there, when everybody seemed panic-stricken and nobody could tell what was going to happen, oppressed by the gravity of our affairs, I went to my room one day and I locked the door and got down on my knees before Almighty God and prayed to Him mightily for victory at Gettysburg. I told Him that this was His war, our cause, His cause, but we couldn't stand another Fredericksburg or Chancellorsville where they lost a lot of troops. And I then and there made a solemn vow to Almighty God that if he would stand by our boys at Gettysburg, I would stand by him. And he did stand by you boys, and I will stand by him. After that, he said, I don't know how it was, and I can't explain it. Soon, a sweet comfort crept into my soul that God Almighty had taken the whole business into his own hands, and that things would go all right at Gettysburg. About 12 days later, he called for a national day of prayer to recognize and confess the presence of the Almighty Father and the power of his hand. So that's from the Battle of Gettysburg. All right, now we were talking about this vacancy on the United States Supreme Court and who Donald Trump is going to pick. I've got a column in here. Let me grab that one. It's a column in here actually from CNN, I believe, by Chris Cillizza, interestingly enough. Let me get there. Chris Cillizza is an arch liberal, used to be at the Washington Post. Now he's a talking head at CNN. And he says this, that Donald Trump's dream casting for America's next SCOTUS justice is Amy Coney Barrett. SCOTUS stands for the Supreme Court of the United States, like POTUS is President of the United States, FLOTUS is First Lady of the United States, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. And he says you go to central casting and look for the kind of judge that Donald Trump is looking for, you come up with Amy Coney Barrett. This is written by an arch liberal. How you look, he says, is a major marker for how you will do in Trump's world. You need to look the part for him to imagine you in the job. Your personal story has to stand out in the crowd. And he says this about Amy Barrett. This is the liberal saying this, she is, among other things, number one, a woman, 2, a mother of 7, 3, she's young, she's in her mid-40s, 4, she is a person of faith, and 5, she is a reliable conservative, particularly on social issues. And this comes from her sincere and deeply rooted Roman Catholic faith. So this is where having a Roman Catholic on the Supreme Court is an asset, because she believes what the Catholic Church teaches about marriage, about homosexuality, and about life. And she would be the first female conservative on the Supreme Court. Some will say that Sandra Day O'Connor she was not a conservative. She let us down in ruling after ruling after ruling. So Amy Barrett will be the first female conservative on the United States Supreme Court, and Chris Cillizza suggesting that that's part of what makes her an attractive choice for Donald Trump. Now, she got 55 votes last year, remember. This was just in October of 2017, less than a year ago. This same committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, investigated her, they interrogated her, and she passed with 55 votes. She got Democrats Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Joe Donnelly from Indiana, and Tim Kaine from Virginia, as well as several moderate Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. So remember this. Susan Collins has been the most obstreperous Republican on this so far. She said, I cannot support a nominee who would overturn Roe v. Wade, who has some hostility to Roe v. Wade. Cannot do it. So she's big stare decisis when it comes to abortion. But last year, same judge, same values, same judicial record, she voted for her, and so did Lisa Murkowski. Now, Joe Manchin could be a vote again. Joe Donnelly from Indiana could vote for her again, because they are being challenged. They are up for re-election as senators in November. And so this vote is going to come right before the election. It'll still be fresh in the minds of the voters in West Virginia, the voters in Indiana. He'd better vote right on this, or it could cost him when the votes are cast. So a good chance to pick up a couple of votes there. Heidi Heitkamp, she's being challenged in North Dakota. Claire McCaskill is in a fight for her life in Missouri, which is a pro-life state. Donald Trump won by double digits there. So both Heidi Heitkamp and Claire McCaskill, simply for political reasons, may wind up voting for her along with Joe Manchin and Joe Donnelly. But, and you'd hope you'd pick up all the Republicans, like they did the last time. All 52 Republicans voted for Amy Coney Barrett the last time, and they should do so again. Here's a piece in the stream. Well, let's get a couple of sound bites here on the table to let you know where some of the rest of the world is thinking about Amy Coney Barrett. Here is Susan Collins. I just mentioned her as one of the ones that's, we don't know where she's going to come out, but the signals that she's sending are not encouraging. Here is clip number 2.
There are people on that list whom I could not support because I believe that they have demonstrated a disrespect for the vital principle of stare decisis, which, as Chief Justice Roberts has said, is a fundamental principle of our judicial system that promotes even-handedness and stability. I'm not going to go into which ones those are, but there are people on that list whom I could not vote for.
And Amy Coney Barrett will be at the head of that list. And I'm going to mention this in my column, which I'm going to refer to here in just a minute. But if she really believed in the doctrine of stare decisis, if Susan Collins did, she would have been screaming about the Supreme Court's ruling on unions just last week. Supreme Court overturned, they ignored stare decisis, they overturned themselves a ruling they issued in 1977, and they trashed it. They shredded it. They said that opinion's out of here. It's history. It's in the archives. And they issued a new ruling that contradicted the ruling from 1977, saying to the unions, no, you cannot compel members of the union to pay union dues. You cannot, rather, you cannot compel non-union members to pay union dues in light of the fact that you do collective bargaining and so forth. You cannot compel workers to pay union dues. Well, that's they just abrogated stare decisis, showed no respect for it, no reverence for it whatsoever, just shredded it. You didn't hear a peep from Susan Collins. So this deal about stare decisis and how she's got this reverence for this key principle of constitutional jurisprudence is just so much smoke. Because she believes in abortion, she's trying to hide behind some Latin phrase to impress you and think she can fool you into accepting abortion as a constitutional principle. Now here is legal commentator Alan Dershowitz. He was on with Maria Bartiromo Sunday morning on the Sunday Morning Futures program on Fox News. Here's what he had to say.
If he wants to unite the country and broaden his own base, is to pick a true conservative libertarian, one who emphasizes individual liberty over the power of the state. So if he can pick a genuine libertarian rather than somebody who's oriented towards state power, it will contribute enormously to the country and enormously to bringing the people together.
Now, it all depends what he means by libertarian. Because I, for instance, am a libertarian on economic issues. I think the government ought to stay out of economic issues, except under one circumstances. Their job is to enforce contracts in the economic sphere, and that is it. Their job is to enforce contracts in the economic sphere. Get rid of all the other government intrusion into our economy except for that one thing. That's justice. You got to have justice. You got to have a system of justice in order to make an economy work. That's what Mexico does not have. They just elected a guy that's so far to the left he'll fall off the edge of the globe. But they elected him because their system there is so corrupt and everybody knows it. So they're just voting for change. They voted for somebody who's even worse than the guy that they had. But it's because there's no justice. You build a business in Mexico, and somebody will come and snatch it right out from under you, or they'll plunder your profits, and you have no place you can go to get some kind of justice for that. So I'm an economic libertarian, but I am not a social libertarian, because you remember, social libertarians do not want any rules or laws that govern human conduct. They don't want any of that. They want people to be free to do whatever they want, whenever they want, to whomever they want. And that's not what social conservatives believe. We believe there ought to be certain standards to which people are held accountable in a culture that's going to work. We believe you should have a solid definition of marriage, and you should expect people to be accountable to their vows. And if they failed their vows, then that should give some kind of primacy to the offended party in court when you're trying to decide alimony and disposing of assets and all that kind of stuff. We believe there ought to be laws against theft and burglary and all that kind of thing, and laws against murder. So we're not social libertarians. So if Alan Dershowitz wants to have a social libertarian on the Supreme Court, that would be an absolute disaster. It would be abortion on demand. It would be all the drugs you want to use, whenever you want to use them. Not a good idea. We'll be back. Stay with us.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Exposing Washington reveals the deception that plagues our nation's capital.
The mainstream media refuses to tell the truth of what's really happening.
Exposing Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman brings you the inside scoop of what's happening in our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
One of my favorite things to do in Israel is take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildman, President of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We'll be taking our annual tour of Israel in March of 2019, but it's time to sign up. We have a lot of folks sign up early, and last year, in fact, we filled up several months in advance. So for all the information on this trip to Israel, a bucket list trip for most people, go to the website twholyland.com. That's twholyland.com. Or for a free brochure, call us at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your phone number. We'll be flying direct from the States to Tel Aviv and then begin our tour in Jerusalem of Israel. We hope you can join us in 2019.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Got a little bit of housekeeping I got to clean up here, so pardon me just for a moment. Okay, got that done. The column, by the way, is up at afa.net, afa.net. You can go there and read it. The title of the column is Roe is the Issue. There is no other issue. Before we jump into that, I got a little story here from the University of Washington School of Computer Science. I emphasize the last word. This is supposed to be a school of science, not a school of philosophy, not a school of mythology, not a school of fiction, but a school of science. Now, what happened is one of its professors wrote a paper. This sounds just like Google remixed. One of its professors wrote an article saying that sex differences account for the fact that women are less likely to pursue computer science degrees. You remember James Damore at Google. He put a piece up on their intercompany blog arguing the same thing, that there's a reason why there aren't more women in the sciences. They don't want to be. And maybe it's because they're women. Their inclination, their interests are just different, not their abilities. They can do it, but they're just drawn to do other things. Now, the school officials didn't even try to rebut his article, his piece, even though he cited research data after research data. They just said, quote, the source data used in the piece is not our concern, end quote. In other words, the School of Science is saying we don't care what the data is. We don't care what the science is. Our minds are made up. Do not confuse us with things like the facts and things like research and things like actual science. And so the professor rightly said, look, they've made their decision based on ideology. not on science, because they wouldn't even deal with the science. He was citing findings from a University of Pittsburgh study, a study published by the National Academy of Science, and another study published by Leeds Beckett University. So he wasn't picking this stuff kind of out of the fog. It was based on solid science. And he said, look, women can code, but often they don't want to. So you're not saying there's something intellectually deficient about women. They can do it, they just don't want to.
A woman's choice.
It's a woman's choice, and these are the people that are supposed to believe in women's choice, so let them choose. Yeah. They don't want to go into science and technology and engineering and math, then don't force them. So anyway, that's from the University of Washington, basing their scientific conclusions on ideology rather than science. Now, in my column on the Supreme Court and the issue of the vacancy on the Supreme Court and Donald Trump's choice to fill it, I do say nice things about Amy Barrett in here, but that's not primarily what the column is about. The column is that I believe the abortion issue is, in fact, the only issue on the table. And it's the only issue that ought to be on the table. Now, a lot of people might say otherwise. In fact, you've even heard Donald Trump say, I'm not even going to ask these nominees about their position on abortion. That's probably just good politics. It wouldn't bother me if I knew where a candidate was coming from. It wouldn't bother me if they were asked, would you overturn Roe v. Wade? It wouldn't bother me if a nominee said, well, I cannot comment on a case that I haven't seen. You're asking me to make a judicial decision on a case that I have not seen. I don't know the facts. I don't know the history. I don't know the background. I don't know prior court decisions. I couldn't possibly tell you how I'm going to vote on a case that might be challenged on Roe v. Wade grounds because I have not seen the case. So I think that's a safe place for a nominee to be, and it's also a valid place for a nominee to be. So I don't think we're going to I don't think any candidate is going to stand up and say, yeah, I would overturn Roe v. Wade first chance I get, because they would be commenting then or making a decision about a case that they hadn't had a chance to read or hear. But this is the only issue that matters. The only issue that matters is getting a candidate on the Supreme Court that believes that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided. That is the only thing that matters. And part of the reason is if you have a nominee, or you have a judge, let's put it this way, if you have a judge, a justice that gets it right on Roe v. Wade, he'll get it right on everything else. If he gets it right on Roe v. Wade, he'll get it right on everything else. If he gets it wrong on Roe, he'll get it wrong on just about everything else. Now, the reason I say this is urgent and is really the only issue that matters is I believe we as a nation are running out of time to deal with our second major national sin. Our first was slavery. That was our original sin. We were birthed with legal slavery in America. That was our original sin. Took a civil war to deal with that sin. This is our second national sin, the issue of abortion. And if we don't fix this while we have the opportunity, we will fall under the judgment of God, and He will not be kind to us. We have the blood right now of 60 million innocent babies on our hands, and that's all that God sees when we lift our hands to Him in prayer. Isaiah 1:15 says, even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Now, if we continue to legalize this butchery, the land will soon vomit us out as it vomited out the ancient Canaanites. Leviticus 18 says, you shall keep my statutes and my rules, lest the land vomit you out when you make it unclean, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. Now, we're going to hear a lot of bloviating bilge. I kind of like that phrase, by the way.
Bloviating bilge?
Bloviating bilge. I'm gonna patent that phrase. Yeah. But we're going to hear a lot of bloviating bilge, just like we heard from Susan Collins about stare decisis. This is the notion that prior precedents established by the Supreme Court must be observed. Precedent is treated by our friends on the left as if it has some kind of sacred, inviolate status. It does not. Not even the Supreme Court, if the justices are honest with us, believe that stare decisis overrules everything else. We didn't need to look any further than their ruling against compulsory union dues just last week. They overturned a precedent that was established by the court in 1977. So much for inviolate precedent. Even Jake Tapper, who occasionally veers into decent journalism, reminded a guest on his program last week that the court has, in fact, listen to this, and he actually underestimates this, has reversed itself more than 200 times. For research I did for a writing project several years ago, it was more like 275 to 300 times. But anyway, the court has reversed itself. In other words, it has dishonored stare decisis 200 times in its history. On the issue of the criminalization of homosexuality, for instance, it tossed out a precedent that it had established in just 17 years ago. In 1986, the court correctly ruled that homosexual conduct can be made a crime. In 2003, just 17 years later, they reversed themselves and said that it couldn't be made a crime. Now, in 2013, the court ruled correctly that the definition of marriage was an issue for the states. Then, with dizzying whiplash speed, the court ruled just 2 years later, in 2015, that it wasn't an issue for the states, and they then proceeded to impose sodomy-based marriage on the entire country. Now, there is, in fact, no constitutional right to abortion. This is because, as Antonin Scalia observed, there is no right to abortion in the Constitution. You can read the Constitution from front to back. You can read it from back to front. You can read it in Sanskrit. You can read it upside down while hanging by your knees, and you will not find the word abortion anywhere in the document. What that means, according to the 10th Amendment, remember, any authority not granted to the federal government is given where? To the states or the people respectively. So this is an issue, according to the Founders' Constitution, that is reserved for the states. So it's important to notice in passing that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it will not suddenly make abortion legal. I got a typo I just noticed in the column. It will not suddenly make abortion legal. It will simply mean that the issue will rest where it should have been all along, with state lawmakers and governors. Now, some states will protect the slaughter of the unborn. Others will ban abortion because it is infanticide, the murder of an innocent human being in his earliest stage of development. States that value life will ban this horrific and medieval practice. States that value death and bloodshed will not. Now it's time to let the people and not the court decide who lives and who dies. Those states which choose life will receive the blessing of heaven, glory, honor, and peace, according to Paul in Romans 2. Those states which reject life will receive, quote, wrath and fury and tribulation and distress, also according to Romans chapter 2. Now, if the president keeps his promise to choose a justice from the list provided by the Federalist Society, the AFA, as I mentioned, recommends Amy Barrett, he will almost certainly pick a judge who believes Roe was wrongly decided as a matter of constitutional law. If the new justice honors constitutional principle, in time, a new day of life will dawn in America. May it be, Lord. All right, that column is up at afa.net. Encourage you to read it, encourage you to share it with friends. This is going to be a discussion that's going to dominate the nation's conversation here in short order. Once this nomination is made, this is all we're going to be talking about for a while, and the issue of abortion is going to be front and center. I want you to be prepared for this discussion even before it happens. Well, that's it for the first hour. We will be right back with more content after the news, so stay with us. You are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. We'll be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, and July 4th is coming up, Independence Day, as we look back on 1776, the freedoms, the liberty that God has blessed us with, and the valor that it took to get to that place by our founding fathers. And so let's appreciate what God has done, and let's celebrate America this July 4th.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Wildfires continue on a rampage throughout the American West, with evacuations across multiple states and towns throughout canceling July 4th fireworks shows out of fear the celebrations could light dry brush. Anita Vogel reports.
Colorado's largest of a dozen fires has already destroyed more than 100 homes and burned nearly 100 square miles. One woman getting out just in the nick of time.
As soon as we got to the top of our driveway, the sheriff was there. And he said two words: go fast.
Meanwhile, in California, north of Sacramento, the county fire grew by nearly 1,000 acres an hour Monday, with 2,000 firefighters on hand. California Fire Division Chief Chris Anthony.
The fires are burning differently than they have in the past. And I think the trends are showing that fires are getting larger and they're getting more destructive.
In Utah, evacuation orders are in place around the Dollar Ridge fire, knocking out 30,000 acres. In Los Angeles, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
The hunt for a suspect is underway after two people working for a contracting company were shot outside a Kansas elementary school. Overland Park Police spokesman John P. Lacey says there were no students around during the incident.
We know it's a white male, and at the same time we're getting information. You have to understand he does work with the contracting company, so we have an idea who we're looking for, but that's going to be forthcoming. This is the first crime scene. The second crime scene is located at 151st in Metcalf, and the third is at 148 in Metcalf, where a carjacking occurred. The suspect took a black Denali, but we are currently looking for that black Denali at this time.
The woman who became infamous for pretending to be black so she could work for the NAACP is awaiting trial for defrauding the state of Washington. Tanya J. Powers has the story.
Former Spokane NAACP President Rachel Dolezal is awaiting trial on charges including welfare fraud. She made headlines in 2015 when her parents told reporters she was white and not black, as she identifies.
Are you African American?
I don't understand the question.
That audio from KXLY News. The following year, she changed her name to Nkechi Diallo. She is accused of illegally receiving more than $8,000 in food and child care assistance between August 2015 and November 2017. During that time, her bank statements show $84,000 in her account that wasn't reported to the state of Washington. She has pleaded not guilty. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Canada continues to fight back against U.S. tariffs, but people on this side of the border see a double standard when it comes to media coverage. Chris Woodward continues our coverage.
In response to the Trump administration's tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada and other countries, Canada has slapped a tax of 10% on more than 80 American products, including coffee beans, strawberry jam, maple syrup, and toffee. The move comes as some Canadians are boycotting the U.S. and its products. USA Today says hashtags such as Boycott USA, Buy Canadian, and Vacation Canada are bubbling among what USA Today calls patriotic Canadians. Why are they considered patriots and Americans wanting to help U.S. goods and workers are bad? Seton Motley of Less Government weighs in.
You know, it's pro-Canada and yay and go Canada and, you know, be proud to be Canadian, and then America First is racist and xenophobic and all that. No, it's amazing that a president, under the banner of America First, and trying to advance the interests of his nation, is considered bad by as the overwhelming majority of the media and as much of the American people as it is. It's stunningly stupid to me.
Motley is no fan of tariffs, adding he thinks there is a better way, but he gives kudos to President Trump for acknowledging the problems with America's trade agreements.
The trade situation currently stinks, and since he's the only one that identified it, and he's the only one that was trying to fix it, I'm going to stick with him.
I'm Chris Woodward.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Because life is uncertain, don't go out and just say, well, if the Lord's coming back, I only need this little bit of a garden. No, you go out and you sow your seed and you work hard and you involve yourselves, because he says you don't know what's going to happen.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Searching for Heaven on Earth, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
There are people on that list whom I could not vote for.
Roe v. Wade is doomed. It is gone because Donald Trump won the election.
It is settled law, and it is a precedent, whether you like it or not.
Roe v. Wade in many different ways has been affirmed over the years.
God help these old men if they tick off these suburban women and who've never really thought that their reproductive rights were at risk.
Roe v. Wade is going to disappear.
Jeff, I heard you say earlier that within 18 months abortion could be illegal in as many as 20 states.
No, I said abortion will be illegal in as many as 20 states because Roe v. Wade is dead.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent as always. Glad to have you in the conversation however you happen to be there. Live streaming us on Facebook, which you can do right now. Live streaming us on YouTube, which you can do right now. Just find our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, click the little bell in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll get a notification when the next live broadcast Focal Point is about to start. Same thing on Facebook. Watch us on Facebook. You'll get a notification letting you know that the live broadcast is about to start. You might be listening to us on one of our 184 stations that comprise the AFR network. You might be audio streaming us on your computer at afr.net or catching us on a podcast, which you can also get by going to afr.net or click the Learn More button right on the banner on the Facebook page, and it'll take you right to the podcast page. Happy to welcome to our Focal Point studio a distinguished guest, the assistant to the president of the American Family Association, Walker Wildman. And I'm going to be very nice to you because I like working for your dad, and I don't want to do anything to spoil that.
Yeah, Brian, it's good to be in the studio. Glad you're going to be nice to me. And I got to add, many of your listeners might not know this, but I am a mentor of Brian Fisher, because I sat under Brian my last few years of college, and my dad made me sit under you so I could learn about how to carry myself in public, and I learned a lot from it. So many of my characteristics on my radio show, etc., have come from you, for better or worse. Okay. So I am a product of Brian Fisher, Focal Point.
Well, Walker, it's great to have you here, and I've just enjoyed getting to know you, your brother Wesley, and your whole family. Just delightful. Played a lot of golf with Walker and Wesley, and that has just been enjoyable to boot. Well, we want to talk here, Walker, about something that's kind of neat, something that our folks probably haven't heard about yet, but it's an opportunity to clean their clothes and help one of the ministries of AFA in the process. So give us a little bit of the backstory about what it is we are the product that we're talking about, and how it came to be a part of the AFA enterprise.
Yeah, a couple years ago, about 2 years ago, we had two businessmen out of Texas approach us, Jim and Lynn, Jim Duncan, Lynn Ingram out of Texas. And they're in the laundry business and the chemical business and been done very well. But they said, we want to support AFA, not just a one-time gift or, a couple gifts. They said, we want to support the American Family Association for years to come, even when we're gone. And so they brainstormed and brought this idea to our attention, and that is a product such as laundry detergent that is a good product, but also the proceeds from it go to support the American Family Association. Thus led us to develop what we're calling Redeem Clean laundry detergent. Comes in a liquid form, a powder form, and we also have dryer sheets, the static-free dryer sheets. So all these products, but the great thing is, instead of going to your big box local retail store or ordering online from some of these secular companies who knows where the money goes, a lot of it actually goes to Planned Parenthood, some of these big-name detergent companies. But you can support American Family Association just by washing your clothes.
So you don't have to spend any extra money. In other words, if you're going to buy laundry detergent, and most people are going to buy it from someplace.
Right.
Very few people make their own, so they're going to buy it from someplace. Might as well buy it from a place where your dollars are going to be invested in ministry.
Yeah, that's right. And it's one of those things, as you mentioned, it's not one of those optional things. You know, almost washing clothes is a necessity in America. So food, going to the grocery store, getting gas in your car, washing your clothes, detergent, those drop in the first few things we start budgeting for. So as you mentioned, if you're going to wash your clothes, which you are, you might as well support the work of American Family Association, and we like to tag it as every load you do goes to help reach the next generation, and that leads me into where specifically under the AFA umbrella that these funds are going to go to.
Let me just pause and just mention that the profits of this product are going to go right to AFA. The vast majority of the profits that are cleared are going to go right into the ministry of AFA. That's part of what Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan were doing. They weren't just going to slice off a little portion of the profits. Basically, the lion's share of the profits from every sale will go right to Engage. So tell us about the ministry it's going to go to.
Yeah, Engage magazine. Many of you have heard about this. It's been active and going for the last few years now. And Engage magazine is essentially, the analogy I like to use is, it's the bridge between folks who helped found the American Family Association, who've been with us for 20, 30, 40 years, and trying to reach the next generation, those coming behind us. We're trying to bridge that gap. And so Engage magazine is the bridge to past generations and future generations, so that in 10, 20, 30 years, AFA is still strong and stronger than ever before.
So give us a couple of the outreaches of Engage. There's the magazine that you mentioned, again, targeted toward millennials. What else is Engage involved in that people should know about?
Yeah, so Engage has the magazine, the annual magazine that they put out. Great publication, 20, 30 pages, quality articles on the top issues of the day. Engage also has a weekly radio program each Saturday, I believe at 5 or 5:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio. We also have, Engage also organizes several campaigns. One of the great campaigns that Engage does that I love is what we call an orange letter campaign. And we send letters to persecuted Christians in countries like North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. A lot of these persecuted Christians who don't get much attention, oftentimes don't have much encouragement, we actually hand deliver a lot of those letters through one of our partners. And so that's just another way that not only are we reaching the next generation, but we're reaching persecuted Christians in other countries.
Well, if you're paying attention, we've all developed a lot of concern about what's happened to the millennial generations, people between 18 and 34. They're growing up in a culture that's different than the one that their parents' generation grew up in. When I went to school, we had prayer, we had Bible reading and all that kind of stuff. And you don't have that anymore. So people that are millennials today grew up in a world and in an educational system much different than the one that was in place a generation ago. And so we're concerned that those millennials are going to drift away unless we provide some kind of ministry that's really targeted toward them and kind of reaches them on their wavelength. And the staff that we have at Engage, they're millennials themselves. They are deeply committed to Jesus Christ and deeply committed to getting this worldview and this mindset into the next generation, the generation of millennials. They use video production. That's another thing that they're involved in, to create videos that will connect with the millennial generation. Now, Walker, last thing is, if people would like to jump in and start using Redeem Clean to take care of their own laundry, how can they go about it?
Yeah, you can visit our website, afastore.net, and there you can find a lot of different resources that support the American Family Association. You can get our coffee, but the one thing you can get there, which we're talking about, is the Redeem Clean laundry detergent. A couple different options there. You can even do a monthly subscription if you want. So visit afastore.net, afastore.net, afastore.net. Read a little bit about it and order some laundry detergent.
Okay, Redeem Clean is the product, and again, every purchase that you make, the profit from that purchase, the large portion of it, the lion's share of it, is going to go toward the Engage outreach here at AFA to reach the millennial generation. So every purchase is investing in the next generation of believers. All right, thank you, Walker. Appreciate you dropping by, and we will release you to go back to your work of assisting the president.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher here. Don't go anywhere.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
In the movie The Matrix, the blue pill kept the public happy and uninformed. The red pill opened their eyes to the truth. At the Red Pill Expo, I spoke on the topic of getting the government out of healthcare. I asked these 400 people if that's what they really want. So let me ask you, would you give up Obamacare subsidies and Medicare? Would you give charitably to help the truly poor? Obamacare is a wage and wealth redistribution system, and Medicare goes bust in 8 years. The blue pill of delusion is easier to take, but the red pill of truth gives Americans a chance to get back to freedom. Take the red pill by signing up for our action alerts at cchfreedom.org. Sign up on the top of the page at cchfreedom.org.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Netflix continues to ignore the outcry about 13 Reasons Why. The American Family Association, along with Parents Television Council and several other pro-family groups, have reached out to the streaming service urging the cancellation of their program. Netflix has not even responded to our letter. Instead, they released an even more vile Season 2 and are producing Season 3. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says their program is engaging and that it fosters discussion of taboo topics like suicide and sexual assault. But at what cost? 14-year-old Anna Bright and several other teens have committed suicide after watching the show. Hastings calls our objections propaganda. Does he feel the profitability of his company is worth more than the lives damaged or lost because of his show? Please sign our petition to Netflix, learn more, and share our action alert when you visit afa.net. And pray Reed Hastings will recognize the dangers of 13 Reasons Why.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, Brian Fisher here, program Focal Point, Network American Family Radio. Good to have you back. Again, we have reporters everywhere making sure we bring you late breaking news. Jeff, what's the score right now between Colombia and England?
Yeah, I just happened to be checking that when you asked.
Just coincidentally.
It's 0-0 still. It's in the 52nd minute. Both teams are being pretty careful, although they're getting a little upset with each other. A few yellow cards going out there. England's got a corner kick right now. So
you know, you'd almost think that Jeff was doing more than just checking that every once in a while, wouldn't you? If you were to hear his play-by-play going on there.
And by the way, we do have somebody listening from the beach in Ocean City, Maryland.
Ocean City, Maryland, listening to us while they are at the beach.
You know, must be watching us because they posted that on Facebook Live.
All right, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. So that's how
wave at them, everybody.
That's how to celebrate your 4th of July. Let's get a couple of more sound bites in the mix here. We've talked about the fact that Chris Cillizza from CNN wrote a big piece. In fact, a front page article. There's a front page article somewhere. Can't remember what publication it was. But a front page article featuring Amy Barrett's picture right in the middle as likely to be Trump's #1 choice. Chris Cillizza saying she's just right out of central casting. Appearances mean a lot to Donald Trump. Credentials mean a lot to him, and she's got the whole package. She's young. She's got experience on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. She was a professor at Notre Dame Law School for 15 years. So she's a brilliant individual and well qualified to sit on the bench. In fact, You know, you're going to hear people criticize her for her lack of experience, but she's had more judicial experience than Elena Kagan had when President Obama put her on the bench, and she is older than Clarence Thomas was when Clarence Thomas was confirmed for the Supreme Court. So there's an answer both to the youth question and the experience question. Now, we played Susan Collins talking about the myth of stare decisis, and again, don't let them lie to you about the inviolable nature of stare decisis. They just blew that out of the tub last week when they overturned their own ruling, their own opinion from 1977. Now, here's a guy by the name of Cornell Belcher. He is a Democratic pollster, and he's on Sunday morning's Meet the Press. And here's what he had to say about the upcoming vacancy.
Where in this Gallup data do I show where anywhere approaching a majority of Americans think that abortion should be illegal? And God help these old men if they tick off these suburban women and who've never really that their reproductive rights were at risk, and all of a sudden there is at risk and it's real.
Okay, so God help these old men if they take away a woman's right to abortion. Well, you know, that's part of the craftiness of Donald Trump if he goes with Amy Barrett. And we're not sure that he will. We're not presuming anything here. But this would be a woman who would be taking her seat on the bench. So it would be a woman to blame, not the old men on the court. So there, you know, you're looking for hints of how they're going to try to go against the nominee that Donald Trump brings forward, and this is one of them, trying to frighten the Supreme Court into thinking they're going to alienate and tick off a bulk of America. Now here's Hallie Jackson. She is a political reporter for NBC. She was part of the NBC Press Roundtable, and here's what she had to say, clip 5, about the possible choices that Trump is considering.
And I had heard from sources this week, and the president confirmed it on Friday. He is not going to specifically ask where these candidates are, where these potential picks are. And he doesn't have to. They wouldn't be on this list coming out from the Federalist Society if you didn't already know where they stood on that particular issue. One way that I have heard that people close to the president are trying to inoculate against some of that is to push him toward picking a woman. And the president has said he is leaning towards selecting 2 women who are on this short list of maybe 5 to 7, including Amy Barrett.
Okay, so Hallie Jackson talking about the 5 to 7 that Donald Trump is considering, and it does seem like there's a lot of desire on his part to appoint a woman to the Supreme Court, and Amy Barrett would be the pick of the crop of women that's on this list. Now here's Judge Napolitano, clip 6, and this is a little bit odd. I didn't expect to hear this from Judge Naps. Here it is.
It is settled law, and it is a precedent, whether you like it or not. Now, I don't think it's going to be overturned.
You don't.
No matter who the president appoints.
You don't.
Correct.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because the Chief Justice, though a practicing Catholic and pro-life himself, does not believe that fundamental changes should come about in the court.
Well, that's crazy. Where have fundamental changes come from in the last 60 to 70 years? They've all come from the court. And if you want to reverse that trend, if you don't like that, then what you do is you overturn Roe v. Wade, because Roe v. Wade is the quintessential example of cultural change coming through the courts rather than through lawmakers. So if that bothers you, if it bothers you that the court has had such an outsized role in establishing cultural norms and values and mores and all that, then what you want to do is overturn Roe v. Wade as quick as you can and get this issue back in the hands of lawmakers and legislators. So I don't know, you know, Judge Napolitano, again, using this phrase that it's settled law. It's not. You know, and this is embarrassing. He should know better than this. I'm going to read it again to you right out of the Constitution, just so you know that you are right and Judge Napolitano is absolutely dead wrong. This is one of those cases where you know more than Judge Napolitano does about the Constitution, and you can prove it. He referred to Roe v. Wade as settled law, Article 1, Section 1. These are the first words in the body of the Constitution after the preamble, which is great. The preamble is great. But here are the first words in the body of the Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. All legislative powers. How many is all? That's every last bit. Does that leave any to the judicial branch to make law? Absolutely not. None, zero, zip, zilch, nada. So their opinion, whatever opinion they issue, may affect the people in front of them. Just like if you rob a store and you go to court for that, the verdict is going to impact you and you alone. It doesn't impact anybody else who might rob a drugstore. They're going to have to go to court, be prosecuted, and evaluated by a jury of their peers. And that's the way the Supreme Court should be. They should settle cases. Two people come before them with a complaint, and they settle it. It doesn't establish any kind of requirement that any other court come to exactly the same conclusion. So Judge Napolitano clearly wrong about it being settled law and all that, but he apparently is content. He seems to be perfectly content to allow Roe v. Wade to continue in force. And again, as we mentioned, and apparently Judge Napolitano not paying attention, the court just overturned a precedent of its own that had been in place for 41 years on compulsory union dues. Now, Jeffrey Toobin, this guy is the Eeyore of the left. In fact, I forgot to ask you guys to get me some Eeyore sound for the program today. I meant to do that, and I slipped up. But Jeffrey Toobin, this is a montage of Jeffrey Toobin, who's the legal analyst at CNN. This guy should bring joy and enthusiasm to everybody on the left. Listen to what he has to say.
Roe v. Wade is doomed. It is gone because Donald Trump won the election. Abortion will be illegal in quite a significant part of the United States soon. All this fantasy talk about, oh, I don't know if Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned.
Yeah, which we just
of course it's going to be overturned. Roe v. Wade is going to disappear. It arrived in 1973, and it will die shortly.
Jeff, I heard you say earlier that within 18 months that abortion could be illegal in as many as 20 states.
No, I said abortion will be illegal in as many as 20 states because Roe v. Wade is dead today.
Roe v. Wade is dead today. Well, all I can say is may it be. I hope that Jeffrey Toobin speaks as a prophet when he says these words. Remember in the days of Jesus, the chief priest said that Christ was going to die on behalf of all the people, and he spoke prophetically. Even though he had no idea what he was saying, he was still speaking the words of a prophet. God had him speak those words to let people know what was coming. So maybe Jeffrey Toobin, without even knowing it, is a prophet. Let us hope that Roe v. Wade is doomed. Let's hope it is dead today. Now here's Allison Camerota with CNN commentator Charlie Dent talking about what they believe is the irony in the pro-life movement of being for border enforcement. Let's listen.
Is there some irony about this playing out and people who are so adamantly pro-life while children are being separated from their parents, even babies are being separated from their parents at the border, and that President Trump is supposedly trying to deal with that, but there are more than 2,000 children who have been separated from their parents and they haven't been reunited? And we don't know if they're going to be or how they're going to be because the federal government doesn't seem to have a mechanism for doing so?
Well, it's pretty hard to get awfully sanctimonious on the pro-life issue while you're witnessing children being separated by from their parents and their families. It is really that's an irony and a real contradiction. It's pretty hard to go out there and wave the flag of being pro-family while watching these families be torn apart, but then you can just fall back and say, hey, but I'm pro-life. I guess that makes it all better. Well, it really doesn't. So there's a real contradiction there.
You know, the real irony here is that they can get so worked up about tearing children from the arms of their mothers, but will defend to the death the right to tear children from the wombs of their mothers and dismember them in the process. That's where the real irony in this issue is found. Well, we're going to move on to the immigration issue for a little bit. People in the media are saying, look, you got to get your abortions now while you can. Salon writer Mary Elizabeth Williams, my mother couldn't get a legal abortion, and I can't believe, using an expletive deleted, that I have to worry about my daughters not being able to get one either. You know, I thought about this. I wonder if Mary Elizabeth Williams is alive today because her mother wanted to abort her but couldn't. So I don't know. I mean, I'm curious about that. Only reason she might be alive today to complain about it is that it was against the law to have an abortion in her mother's day. Entertainment Weekly executive editor Carlos Sacinco, if you are a woman and a friend of mine with a birthday coming up soon, I'm getting you an abortion for a present while I still can. Enjoy it. Some more outrage from the left on abortion. We'll be right back with more.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813. Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point, keeping you abreast of news around the world. What's the score right now in the World Cup game between England and Colombia?
1-0 England.
And they got their goal on a
penalty kick. The guy was it was a free kick set up outside the penalty box. England's captain was breaking around, and a guy jumped on his back, basically took him down.
You know, it seems like a lot of the goals are being scored on penalty kicks in the World Cup.
Yeah, well, that's because a lot of them went into past the overtime. So basically, the match, soccer match, is 90 minutes long. If they're tied after that in the World Cup, where it's single elimination, they play another 30 minutes. If it's still tied after, think about that. That's 2 hours of being running around on that football pitch, soccer pitch. If you're still tied after that, then you take a series of, I think it's 5 penalty kicks, and whoever's got the best. After 5, if you're still tied, you keep going until the tie is broken.
Well, I saw a penalty kick. By the way, number to call if you want to join the conversation. We'll take phone calls over the course of this last half hour. Number to call is 888-589-8840. Number is 888-589-8840. Take your calls on anything we've talked about, the quality of Jeff Reed's play-by-play call of the World Cup.
I will tell you this much.
Your calls on his work ethic. We'll take calls on that topic.
There has been some really good acting in this.
They draw the penalty.
Yeah,
they can flop like those guys in the NBA.
A lot of complaining. I mean, it is crazy.
Well, you know that save that I guess it was the Russian goalie made in overtime. There was a penalty kickoff, and that was the most incredible save I've ever seen. It was a kick save. The guy from Spain was kicking, and you know the goalies don't have time to wait till the ball is kicked. They've got to guess. So the goalie leaps to the right. I mean, flat out, stretched out, because he thinks that's the direction he's going. His right. Instead, he kicks it right back toward the center of the goal. And all he could do was reach out up his left leg.
He flicked his foot up there.
His left leg up there and kicked it away. That was an incredible athletic feat.
You know, we've got to give Jeff a little grace because he loves the English soccer team.
Well, I grew up in England. England, played a lot of soccer in England.
So we give him a lot of grace. And,
well, I'm pulling for England. I hope England wins too. So. Yeah. All right, back to Amy Coney Barrett just for one moment before we move on. You know, she's got a lot of good backing. Robbie George is backing her. He's an eminent legal scholar. The contributors at National Review have endorsed her. Washington Examiner has a contributor that's endorsed her. And she was a former law clerk to Antonin Scalia, by the way, so she would have had the opportunity to absorb some of his judicial thinking. And here, I love what she says here. We want in a justice someone who applies the law. I don't know that you have any idea. I mean, I get a tingle up my leg when I hear somebody say that. We want a justice who applies the law. Everybody says we want a justice who interprets the law. No, we do not. We do not want a justice who interprets the law. That's how you get Roe v. Wade and these penumbras and, you know, having the ability to define one's existence for one's own self. All this judicial gibberish is from people who are trying to interpret the law, and they just interpret it and mangle it and twist it and elongate it all out of shape. No, what we want is a judge who applies the Constitution and the law, takes the plain meaning of the Constitution, looks at the case in front of it, and applies the Constitution. Same with the laws that Congress passes. Now, that's the job, is to apply the Constitution and apply the laws that Congress passes, not to decide whether they're constitutional. The court has no business, in truth, in reality, in deciding whether something is constitutional or not. That is not their job. There's no place in the Constitution where they are given that authority. That was invented by Chief Justice John Marshall in 1803, long time ago, early in the history of the Republic. So early, people think it's a part of the Constitution, that the Supreme Court gets to decide what's a law and what isn't, what's constituted and what's not. They don't. Not their job. If the people decide that a law is unconstitutional, their job is to go to their lawmakers and convince them to correct their mistake. See, that way the people are still sovereign over these. Right now, we've lost all control over these issues to the Supreme Court. Nobody can do anything about it. So anyway, she believes that Supreme Court jurists ought to apply the law and not interpret it. A justice's duty, she says, is to the Constitution. It is thus more legitimate for her to enforce her best understanding of the Constitution rather than a precedent she thinks clearly is in conflict with it. She's a mother of 7 children, by the way, one with special needs, and several of them from the country of Haiti. So, you know, and she also indicated a possible way that you could go at Roe v. Wade. She says Roe v. Wade was based on the so-called right to privacy. That was the legal justification for Roe v. Wade, is the right to privacy. But she says what we're dealing with here with abortion is the life of the child. So this really isn't a privacy issue. This is a matter of the life of the child. So she's suggesting maybe even that could be a route to go for those that want to challenge Roe v. Wade in court. You know, and Philip Juregi from Judicial Action Group, he believes that Amy Coney Barrett might actually be even better than Neil Gorsuch. Hard to argue with that. And again, remember, she was older than Clarence Thomas when he was confirmed. She has more judicial experience than Elena Kagan had when she was confirmed. So those arguments have no force. All right, number to call is 888-589-8840. Give us a call. 888-589-8840 is the number to call if you would like to join our conversation. Let me see here if I can get the call screen software up and running. I seem to be frozen out. I think I'm frozen.
Yeah, mine too.
Are you frozen too?
Yeah, I'll have to restart it.
Okay, I'm going to reboot mine here. See if it'll reconnect here. Yeah, that's working now. It's starting to pop up. So you're going to see a lot of religious ignorance, a lot of bigotry. They're going to go after Amy Barrett on the basis of her faith. They tried to do that last October, and it did not work. They tried, but they couldn't get anywhere with it. She still got 55 votes, and I think it's going to be a little bit embarrassing for them to try that same tactic again, their religious bigotry. Remember, because the Constitution prohibits the use of a religious test for federal office. You can't apply a religious test to any office in the federal government. And yet these, the senators on the Judiciary Committee were trying to do that, basically, by applying a religious test to Amy Barrett, and that's something you are not allowed to do. The Constitution itself prohibits it. Now, what the Constitution is actually talking about there, what the founders are talking about, is having some kind of a statement of religious principle that you compel everybody to agree with as a condition of serving in office. You cannot do that. Now, it actually doesn't prohibit senators from asking somebody about their religious convictions. I'm convinced that that's perfectly appropriate. You ought to be able to do that. We ought to have a right to ask candidates for office about their most deeply held convictions. What are the things that drives them? How do they develop their worldview? And all that kind of a thing. In fact, states could freely apply religious tests all they wanted. Every state in the Union, before the enactment of the Constitution, every state in the Union had a religious test for office. And that's the reason that the founders in the federal Constitution did not use one, because they figured if somebody needed to be vetted on the grounds of religion, that would have already taken place at the state level. So we don't need to duplicate some kind of religious screening. You know, the people that make it through the gauntlet at the state level, they will serve in the federal government, and that's up to the states. We will accept anybody in the federal government that they have vetted on the grounds of their religious principles. Jeff, I don't know about you. I'm still getting, my software is just cycling and cycling and cycling.
Yeah, I've got, you want the first caller? Joan from Pinehurst, Texas?
Yeah, can I get her online though?
Yeah, let's see.
I can do it if you can't.
Can you bring her online, Rob?
Should be on.
Joan, are you there? No, it doesn't look like we're making the connection there. I mean, I see her name there, but I don't see a way to bring her online.
Let's try Ed in Ohio.
Okay, Ed in Ohio, can you hear me? Yeah. That's it for Ed. Looks like we got some problems with the software. So let me try one more time to close it down and open it back up, and we may be toast on calls today unless we can figure out what is gumming up the works here. So let's try one more time. There we go. Now it seems like it's working.
Is Larry there?
What's that? Yeah, I've got Larry, I've got Ed, and Joan. So as soon as we can get their boxes lit up, we'll bring them online. So hang on if you can be patient, Joan in Pinehurst. We hope to get to you here in just a quick second. Ed in New Bream, Ohio. Hope to get to you here in a quick second, and we'll be happy to take your call. So let's see if we can get everything.
We're going to have to back up and punt and reboot the whole thing.
There goes Joan from
Okay, there we go. Joan, Pinehurst, Texas. Welcome. Are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you. I can hear you.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks for waiting, Joan. Thanks for being patient. I'm sorry about the technological screw-up on our end. So what's on your mind?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for educating and informing us. And unfortunately, I think our country's gotten to a place where we are not educated or informed enough on American history and the Constitution and all of those things. First of all, people get so carried away with precedent from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been wrong on major issues quite a few times. So I'm fine with, we're so blessed to have a new opportunity for a new Supreme Court justice. And, you know, if the people in this country would go back and study, they'd realize very important issues. The Supreme Court was okay with slavery at one point. And guess what? They were wrong. And we had a war and all of those things to overdo that. We have so many issues that are taking this country down the wrong path.
All right, Joan, listen. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, I wish we the people would become a little more informed.
Yeah. Well, and this is one case now where I think we can speak. We've got a petition, by the way, at afa.net. I encourage everybody to go there and sign it. A petition at afa.net. You can sign it. I did this morning. That will be sent to President Trump and urge him to pick Amy Coney Barrett. You know the principles. You know what's involved. You know her qualifications. Sign our petition. We'll get it to President Trump on your behalf. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Summer. It's relaxing at the ocean. It's camping under the stars. It's a day at the theme park or a backyard barbecue. Summer takes families to a lot of places. One place we hope it doesn't take your family is just down the street to the Target store. Why? Because of Target's harmful policy that allows men into women's restrooms and changing areas. Find out more at American Family Association's website, afa.net.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Meet Dan Steiner, president of Preborn.
Jill came into our center about 8 months ago, and she was in a really difficult spot because her husband her boyfriend was incarcerated. She didn't have a place to live. She's out on the street. She came into our center, and when she saw her baby on the ultrasound, she says, I've got to find a way to do this. She changed from abortion-minded to wanting to choose life for her baby, and that's where we came in, coming beside that ultrasound with baby clothes, with housing for her. Her baby just delivered last Wednesday. It's a little boy. He's beautiful. That's the power of ultrasound.
80% of women choose life when they see their baby on ultrasound. To find out more about how you can help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome back to the last segment of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Just 13 minutes before you will have your Independence Day shore leave. Again, the most generous shore leave policy in all of conservative talk radio. You will not have to be back to your battle stations until Thursday at 1:05 Central, the most generous shore leave policy in all of conservative talk radio. And again, I want to remind you as we go into this last segment that you can sign a petition in support of Amy Barrett by going to afa.net. This is the time, in other words, for you to man your battle stations. Do not want you to leave the deck of the USS Focal Point until you have fired a round at the enemy. You can do that by going to afa.net and signing our petition supporting Amy Barrett for the Supreme Court. It'll be sent on your behalf to Donald Trump. So the more people that sign, I think we had 23,753 people signed it when I signed on this morning. So you got at least that many, and more Donald Trump will get a petition from however many people, so he'll know that there are a lot of people. Let's get that thing to 100,000, so he'll know that there are 100,000 people out there that know the issue, they're aware of the issue, and they like Amy Barrett, which is somebody that he likes. She's a female jurist, and he wants to be the first president to nominate a conservative female jurist to the United States Supreme Court. So go to afa.net and sign the petition. By the way, here's a huge argument to close the borders. We need to close the borders for the sake of women. Here's what I'm talking about. This is from CBS. The United States, now this whole study is complete hogwash, but I'm just reporting to you what CBS is telling us. The United States has been ranked for the first time among the 10 nations deemed to be most dangerous for women, by experts in the field. The most dangerous for women by experts in the field. Number 9 out of 10. This is the 9th most dangerous nation in the world for women. This is according to 550 experts in women's issues. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and here are the ones that are also on the list: India, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Saudi Arabia, where they just got the right to drive, Pakistan, Congo, Yemen, and Nigeria, and we're on that list. Now, Canada's not on that list. Mexico is not on that list. Not a single country in South America is on that list, which leads to the obvious conclusion: we have got to close our borders for the sake of women. Because if women are allowed into the United States, they will face conditions that are more dangerous than the conditions they faced in Mexico, or in Somalia, or in the Congo, or in Saudi Arabia. So we've got to get busy and build that wall. It's the only decent humanitarian thing we can do for the women in our society. Now let's go to one more. Well, let's grab one more soundbite, and then we'll go to the phones. 888-589-8840, by the way. 888-589-8840 is the number. Let's go to clip number 9. This is a good friend of mine, Raul Labrador. He's a congressman from the state of Idaho, soon to be the governor there. And he's on talking about the issue of border security. Let's listen.
They don't. I mean, if you look at what they're saying is that they want to abolish ICE, they want to have catch and release, they want to make sure that people come to the United States and they get released into the public, and that means that they don't want any border security. They claim that they want border security, but anytime we have a bill in the House that includes border security at the same time that we're doing something for the DACA population, they're unwilling to sign on to it. The only thing they want to sign on to is a bill that has weak security and a lot of amnesty, and Republicans are not going to sign up for that.
Republicans are not going to sign on for that. Raul Labrador sent a strong message. He's from Puerto Rico. He was a citizen by birth, being from Puerto Rico, and he's just been solid from day one on the issue of immigration. Let's go to the phones. Let's begin with Larry in Waynesboro, Tennessee. Larry, thank you for being so patient while we work through our technical difficulties. What's on your mind?
Brian, I want to thank you for being one of the last men standing. Listen, this abortion thing, if you notice, everyone that wants to keep pushing Planned Parenthood are already living and breathing. And there's not a single person on the face of the earth that had a gay or lesbian in their ancestry if they were a true gay or lesbian. God bless you, and hang in there.
All right. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. You know, and that's one of the arguments against same-sex marriage, by the way, is that what we ought to be about as a culture, a healthy culture, is promoting procreation. We want to encourage people to have families. We want to encourage people to have large families. You know, I think the evangelical standard ought to be 3 kids at a minimum. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. If you just have 2 kids, you're just replacing yourselves. You're not multiplying. So the evangelical standard ought to be 3 kids a family. I realize not everybody can do it. Health reasons and age and whatever. But that ought to become the evangelical standard. And how do people have children? Well, they have it through the intimacy between a man and a woman. That's the only way it can take place. The only way you can get a child is you got to have a man contributing something, and you got to have a woman contributing something somewhere. That's the only possible way it can happen. Every child has a mother and a father. You can try to pretend otherwise. You can try to conceal that, but that is the absolute biological fact. And so we ought to encourage procreation, that is, marriage between a man and a woman. Let's go to Ed in New Bremen, Ohio. Ed, welcome. What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm going to say amen to the last caller.
Yes.
And I got the honor and privilege of meeting you a couple of years ago once.
Oh, and up in
I
Columbus?
just wanted to, yes.
Yeah, great. That was a great event. Anyway, go ahead.
I just want to thank you. I do beg to differ when you maybe sometimes call yourself effervescent. I would more describe you as being bold, fearless, selfless, hard-hitting, and right on.
Oh, man, and I couldn't write fast enough to get all that down. So I'm trusting my capable staff to take in very detailed notes, so we'll be able to work that in.
We'll make an amendment to the introduction from now on.
So that's very kind of you, Ed. Anyway, anything else you want to say?
So to say you're a real hero of mine, and you set a great example for every man in America. And I pray after we can get Roe v. Wade turned around, we'll get this sodomy-based unions reversed as well.
Absolutely. All right, Ed, thank you very much. I appreciate the call, and thank you very much for your kind words. That means a lot to me. All right, and Obergefell, everybody's going to consider that to be inviolable precedent, but it's not. Obergefell, that's the ruling that legalized sodomy-based marriage, that can be overturned like anything else. I mean, the Supreme Court has reversed themselves 200 times. They may reverse themselves on Roe shortly. They just reversed themselves on compulsory union dues. They have reversed themselves on slavery. They've reversed themselves on Plessy v. Ferguson. That's how we got Brown v. Board of Education. They reversed Plessy v. Ferguson in that ruling. They reversed themselves all over the place. There is no reason why they cannot reverse themselves on Obergefell. So let's keep that one in mind, and let's keep the wheels churning to get issues in front of courts that would give the Supreme Court an opportunity to overturn Obergefell. And by the way, Mississippi, we enacted a 15-week ban on abortion. You can't abort a baby after 15 weeks in Mississippi. And part of the long-term goal for that is to try to create legislation that could lead to a challenge to Roe v. Wade. So we'll see where that goes. Let's go to Mike in Jamestown, North Dakota. Mike, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Steve. God bless you guys. My question is why is Hillary Clinton and Obama traveling overseas to other countries, doing speeches? I know Hillary does that one where about how she lost and why she lost. Obama, I heard one time on a YouTube clip that he was making videos on how he can create 100 Obamas, 1,000 Obamas, and maybe more. It's like they just don't quit. They don't want to lose, and they're just bound to try and get back in there. But what they're doing is not for the good of the people. I guess just your comments on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, they're free, Mike. They're free to go anywhere they want. One of the guarantees of the in the Declaration of Independence is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That means Americans have the freedom to travel, the freedom to move about. So we don't want to restrict any former president's ability and freedom to travel. It's just kind of a matter of what's tasteful and what's tasteless. I don't know if you heard this about Obama. This is crazy. This is Obama had one regret. This is the only regret, ladies and gentlemen, that Barack Obama had from his 8 years in office. I'll be honest with you. This is a quote. If I have a regret during my presidency, it is that people were so focused on me. People just couldn't take their eyes off of me. I was the center of attention everywhere I went. I couldn't get people to stop staring at me and stop being focused on me and stop being obsessed with me in time to get anything else done. So that's why folks stopped paying attention up and down the ballot, because they were just too enamored with the wonder of me. That's Barack Obama, his one regret. Everybody paid too much attention to him. Let's go to Rachel in Mobile, Alabama. Rachel, I got just about 20 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Okay, I just wanted to say there has always been another way to prevent pregnancy, and that's called having your tubes tied.
Yeah,
you don't have to get a baby to kill. You can have your tubes tied.
Yeah. Well, and there's lots of other ways you cannot have a baby, and that is just to have abstinence, don't have any kind of sex outside of wedlock, carefully measure timing, and you can control factors that way. So there's a lot of different ways not to have a baby that you do not want. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap wherever he's placed you. Don't forget, we are fighting a winnable war. Have a great 4th of July. We'll see you back here on Thursday.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.